Have you ever wondered what comes next after you finish the process of writing your rough draft for your book? Do you feel pressure to start finding a professional editor right away? If so, hold that thought. You're about to discover the critical strategy that could save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on the editing process for your book in today's video. Hey, y'all, welcome to a new Live with Lisa. If you're new here, my name is Lisa, and I create videos that help you learn how to write and live God's way. If you want to honor God with both your life and your writing, this is the place for you. Every week, we go live in partnership with Our Given Purpose Ministries, which is an incredible ministry founded by my dear friend, Tori Slaughter, to help you grow in your walk with God and to get plugged into godly community. So not only can you watch today's live stream on YouTube and Instagram, but on the Our Given Purpose Ministries Facebook page as well. So make sure you get connected there and learn more about that amazing ministry today. So as I said, we are learning today about the editing process and about specifically what is called a self-edit. So we are going to dive into that right now. So first and foremost, what is a self-edit and why is it important? Many writers, when they finish their rough draft of their book, they're excited, they're ready to move forward. They have finally typed those last letters, those last words of their manuscript, and they are ready to find a professional editor and go into the next phase of the writing process. But that is actually a big mistake. A self-edit is really a critical and key part of the writing process, and it's not one that you really should be skipping. And so, first of all, what is a self-edit? Let's start there. A self-edit, most people think editing a book is just purely looking for technical errors, things like spelling and grammar and typos, things like that. And that is an important part of the editing process, but that is only one type of editing. And if you go back to a live stream that I did recently, I actually talked about the 4 steps of the editing process. So make sure you go back and watch that live stream talking about the editing process and the entire editing process. And I really walk you through all of the steps, and each one is important for a different reason. But the editing and revision process really consists of multiple steps, and it's important to know that. Now, a self-edit is when you go read through your entire manuscript and you make structural changes and you correct typos. You do all of those things we're talking about, but you're just going through it yourself to improve the overall quality of your work. And so ideally, this should happen before you work with a professional editor. And that is really important that you do that before you work with the editor, not after. Now, many times you'll need to do a self-edit again after you've gotten feedback from an editor, but it's really important that you do a self-edit on your own before you work with a professional editor. Now, why is this necessary? There's several reasons, so let's talk about what those are. So first of all, self-editing is necessary because it makes you a better writer. It allows you to help you identify your strengths and the weaknesses of your writing, which is just going to help you become better overall in your skill. When you spend time looking at your own work, analyzing it, thinking about the things that are working and the things that may not be working, it just helps you to grow and to strengthen that writing muscle. You become more comfortable with your work, and you're better able to see the different aspects of it, things that you like, things that you need to change. And it's just good to go through that process to help you get better. The second reason that a self-edit is necessary is it really saves your editor a lot of time. You would be amazed at how many, writers will submit their work to a professional editor and they have not touched it. They haven't done anything to it. They haven't, changed anything with it. They have just, not even read through it themselves. They just wrote it and tried to send it to the editor immediately afterwards. And really that just kind of causes a lot of issues for that editor. When we do that, it's not as efficient. is what I'm trying to say. When your editor is going through your manuscript, there's a lot of those changes that they're making at that point. If you haven't done a self edit, they're going to be making a lot of changes that you really could have made yourself. And a lot of editors charge by the word. And so you have this long, manuscript that may be longer than it needed to be. And if you had gone through and done that self edit, then you would have seen those changes that needed to be made, and you could have made those changes yourself. And it just frees your editor up to be able to focus on those aspects of your work that you can't change for yourself. And so it's really important that you make those changes on your own as much as you can. It really allows your editor to not have to focus on some of those changes that you could make on your own, and that frees them up to focus on just improving the work and with the expertise that they have, and really taking full advantage of that. The more time that your editor spends on those smaller changes and those smaller cuts that you could have made for yourself, the less time they may have to spend on really improving the work as much as they can to really make it better based on the expertise that they have that you don't have. So again, hope that makes sense. Hope that really clears that up for you. It saves them that time where they're not having to make those simpler changes, and you can make those changes yourself, and then that frees them up to make the more complex changes and the more complex suggestions that you are looking for. So it really allows their time to go further. And then lastly, it saves you money because your editor, again, doesn't have to make as many of those smaller changes. They're not having to look at cutting a lot of things and making as many changes to typos and things like that. Some of that will still be necessary, but we're trying to cut down on the amount of work that will end up leading to those higher prices and those higher charges, because if you can avoid that, obviously you want to do that. And again, that frees up your editor to focus on the changes that will best benefit the work, and that they can use their expertise on the most. So I hope that is helpful for you and helps you really understand why self-editing is necessary and really is helpful for you in the writing process. All right, let's go into comments. Okay, and so thank you so much, Tori, for posting that. That's the link to the last live stream I did talking about what writers need to know about the editing process. That will be really helpful for you in terms of walking you through those stages of editing. So make sure that you go back and watch that live stream. And Tori says, self-editing is like decluttering the walk-in closet. It looks good, but there are always adjustments. Yes, I love that analogy, Tori. That is fantastic. Yes, that's a great way to think about it. When we can declutter our walk-in closets on our own, right? Many of us can do that. We can go through and say, hey, I don't need these shoes, or I don't wear this outfit anymore. I don't wear this sweater. This dress doesn't fit me, whatever it is, right? And we can kind of identify on our own things that are not working for us anymore, things that we need to remove and maybe give away or get rid of or whatever, right? But that's not the same as having a professional organizer come through and really just completely change the space and adjust things and have an eye for design, right? They're able to make changes that we can't see, but it's good for us to make those changes on our own as well, right? We can free up some space, we can get rid of that clutter like Tori mentioned, and we're able to bring our own knowledge and understanding to that in the beginning. And then we may bring in that professional organizer if we really have, kind of those major things that need a lot more help, right? So that's a great analogy to think about editing and to think about the importance of the self-edit versus bringing in a professional editor. All right. Tori said, there is so much I neglected before learning to self-edit. Thank you for making this a priority because it was super helpful for me. Yeah, it's one of those things when we as writers, when we write, complete our rough draft, we are in a different frame of thinking. We're in a different mindset, right? A lot of times I really encourage writers to just get the ideas out, to not overanalyze or overthink or try to, edit as you go, right? We want to make sure that we're thinking through what we're doing, and just kind of getting the ideas out. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. Yeah, we want to make sure that we're doing that. And then when we go through and go back with the self edit, then we're able to go through in detail and start making those changes and start really analyzing our work. So there's two different frames of mind that we need in the writing process. Drafting is one frame of mind where you're just getting everything out. And then editing, you're going through in more detail and looking at things closely. And that allows you to really see, things standing out when we go through and read through that work and really see what needs to be changed. It can be very eye-opening for a lot of us in many, many ways. Very helpful. Absolutely. All right, so now that we have talked about why self-editing is so necessary and important, I believe every writer needs to self-edit their work. Now let's talk about the keys to success for self-editing. How do we self-edit well? How do we review our work in a way that is effective? So let's talk about it. The first key is, and this is a big one, I see a lot of writers do this, the first key is to never edit while drafting. Never edit while drafting. Make sure you have a complete rough draft before you start the editing process. Now, I just mentioned this a moment ago, but I want to reiterate this and really stress the importance of this. You do not want to edit as you go. That's one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of writers make. I believe this is something that actually keeps a lot of writers from ever finishing their books, because you can get stuck in this editing mode where you just go back and re-edit the same chapter over and over again. And you can get lost in that. You can really go down a rabbit hole with that. And so that's why it's so important that when we're drafting, we stay in drafting mode. We just get the ideas out. It doesn't have to make sense. It certainly doesn't have to be perfect. And we are just trying to get words on the page. And then once we are done with our rough draft, we have to switch over into editing mode. And it's a different frame of mind. That's where we're looking for those mistakes. We're looking for things to change. We're looking for things to improve. And so we don't want to confuse those two modes of thinking and writing. We don't want to edit while we're in draft mode, and we don't want to draft while we're in editing mode. We want to keep them separate. And so when you are editing, you want to make sure that you are not trying to, kind of think through the, draft like you do when you're drafting. And when you're drafting in particular, you don't want to edit until the rough draft is finished. So that's a big one. Never edit while drafting. Key number 2 is to make sure you take a break for at least 2 weeks after you have finished your rough draft before you get started with editing. This is a big one as well. Take a break. This is so important. At least 2 weeks. I would argue if you have the time, you can even take a break for up to a month or so. But you want to give yourself time to step away from the work. Why? Because a lot of times when we're in drafting mode, we're still close to the writing. We still remember things we wrote. We remember especially what we intended when we wrote something. And so the work is still really fresh in our minds. And so it's not helpful for us to go directly into editing at that point, because everything is still kind of at the forefront of our minds. Taking that break actually allows our brain to reset. So where we actually forgot what we forget a lot of what we wrote. And that's a good thing when it comes to editing, because you want to bring a fresh set of eyes, a fresh perspective to your work once you start doing a self-edit. You don't want to have all of the thoughts that were in your mind when you were drafting. You want to put those aside, let those kind of go away, right? And then come back to the work once you've reset and you're able to look at it as if it's a brand new piece of writing. Now that only works to a certain extent because you're still close to it, but it allows us to put some distance between ourselves and the work so that we can look at it and edit it without all of those recent ideas in our minds. A lot of times those things can get in the way because you remember what you intended when you wrote that. You remember what was in your mind. You remember what you were feeling. You remember what you were trying to say. But so we want to let all of that kind of fade and then come back and look at the work with fresh eyes and with that fresh perspective to where we can really see it clearly, close to the way that our readers will see it, because they're not going to know what was in our minds when we were writing it. They're not going to know what we intended. All they have are the words on the page. So we want to put ourselves in a position of being kind of like a reader as much as we can when we're looking at that work, and give ourselves that time and that distance to separate ourselves from it a little bit. I hope that makes sense. So give yourself at least 2 weeks. If you can, give yourself up to a month. I think that is especially helpful and really necessary before you begin the editing process. All right, key number 3 is what I call edit like an editor. Edit like an editor. This is a big one as well. So what this means is when you do a self-edit, you want to do several passes through your work, more than one, where you're reading through it and you're making changes as you go. But the things that you're looking for are going to be different depending on which pass you're going through. Again, go back to that live stream where I talked about the 4 phases of editing, and you want to kind of do something similar when you're editing your own work. So what this looks like practically is you go through your work one time, doing one pass where you're changing big picture issues. You're looking at structural things, right? I talked about this in the live stream about how structural edits go first, developmental edits go first, big picture editing goes first. And so we want to do the same thing when we do a self-edit. Look at big picture issues first. This is not the time to be looking at grammar and spelling and making changes with typos and technical things like that. We're looking at the big picture. Are the characters working? Is the plot working? Does it make sense? If we're writing nonfiction, is the structure helpful? Are the chapters in the right order? Things like that. And then we'll do another pass to correct those line by line, kind of more detailed technical issues that need to be changed. So we work on the big picture issues first, and then we go back again and look at those smaller, fine tuning those details, those smaller issues that need to be changed, and those smaller corrections that we need to make. So make sure you're not trying to do everything all in one pass. You will overwhelm yourself and you'll probably get stuck because again, you'll get in that cycle of revisiting the same chapter over and over again. If you try to do everything all at once, it'll be too much. So make sure you're breaking it down and looking at certain issues with each pass that you're going over your work. That will help make it more manageable for you. All right, key number 4, and this is to read your work out loud at least once to catch more errors. And this is a great one just in terms of helping you understand the importance of just processing your work differently. There's something that happens when you read your work out loud. I don't know if the science behind it, if it activates a different part of your brain or what it is, but there's something about hearing your work read aloud as opposed to seeing it that allows you to pick up on things that you miss the other times that you go through it. When you read your work out loud, you're able to catch things that you miss otherwise. And it's really helpful in terms of helping you identify things with your work that you won't see any other way. And I have found this to be true for myself. And it's interesting how, it can, sometimes it might feel a little overwhelming just to read through the whole manuscript, but I promise you it is worth the effort. And it is so helpful to be able to catch all of those things that you miss as you're reading through it. And it really allows you to process the work differently. So I definitely want to suggest that to you as well, to make sure that you are reading that work out loud at least one time, maybe more than once if you have the availability to do that. Really important that you do that. All right. Let's go into comments for a moment. Tori says, yes, get to the point that we have almost forgotten what we have written. That's a great point. Yes, absolutely, Tori. And that is exactly the point. We want to try to really forget the work as much as we can because it really just helps us to go back and see it clearly in a different way. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. And then the next key is this is a big one as well. Pursue excellence, not perfection. Pursue excellence, not perfection. Now, many of us, I don't know about you all, but I have definitely had those perfectionistic tendencies with my work where I really wanted to you just make every word and every line and every single detail perfect, right? And that is really an illusion. There is no such thing as a perfect book. There really isn't, other than the Bible, right? The Bible is flawless, but every other book is has its its little quirks, its things that could be better, things that we could be done differently. And so we have to accept that and embrace that. We have to embrace that there's going to be a level of imperfection with our work and be okay with that. There are, as I'm sure many of you have experienced this and have read books that were excellent without being perfect, right? I know I have. We've all read our share of books that we absolutely love and wouldn't change a thing about them. And yet they're not perfect. And that is okay. It can be easy to fall into a perfectionism trap with editing. I've been there. I know how that feels, and I know how tempting it can be to think that your book is the one that will be flawless, that your book will be the one that has no mistakes, no issues, no problems at all. And but that is just the reality that we have to accept, that there is no such thing as a perfect book that we write. And so we want to recognize that even if with all the best efforts, right? Having multiple people review our books, having multiple people edit them and give us feedback about them after going through multiple rounds of edits. At the end of the day, there may still be typos, believe it or not. There may still be a mistake here or there. Even professionally published books that are published with the big name publishers, right? Books that you find in your local bookstore or, again, just big publishing companies. Even those books have the occasional typo here and there. And that's okay. It's not the end of the world, right? We don't want to have a book that's full of mistakes, but we have to understand that there's going to be a level of imperfection with our work, and to be okay with that, to accept that, and to understand that we can still produce excellent work that is powerful and meaningful and has an impact and still is not perfect. God uses us every day as imperfect people, and we serve a perfect God who is able to use us perfectly and able to help us to empower us to have an impact perfectly. And he gets the glory for doing that, in part because of our imperfections, in part of because of the things that we do that are not perfect. It allows us to actually bring more glory to him because we can't take the credit for it. Right. And so that is part of the power of our testimony, is understanding that it's not perfect, that there are, messy things in our stories and things that we might have wished were different, or things that, may not be comfortable all the time. Right. But there is beauty that comes out of that imperfection. And that is something that I really hope you walk away from this live thinking about as well. Understanding that there is so much beauty in your story, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, everything is exactly what you envisioned. There's always going to be a level of disconnect between the idea in your mind and the actual product that you produce and bring out into the world. There's always going to be a disconnect. There's always going to be, it's never going to be exactly what you envisioned, but that is okay. And again, we want to embrace that imperfection, embrace the beauty in that imperfection, and recognize that God is still being glorified, in spite of and even because of those imperfections. So if you are self-editing, make sure you are setting a firm deadline for when you are going to publish and stay on track. And that deadline, and make sure that you have people in your life who are holding you accountable for that deadline. That'll help you really avoid falling down the editing rabbit hole to where you don't get lost in the editing process. I talk a lot about the importance of accountability on this channel and in the different live streams I've done. And that will really help you in this process to avoid kind of procrastinating and pushing off your book kind of forever into the distance, right? Make sure you set that deadline, set that date when you're going to move forward with your book, and have that accountability around you to help you in the process of doing that. That will really help you to move forward. All right. And I have a bonus for you today that I know will help you as well. And that is to take regular breaks throughout the editing process. Take regular breaks throughout the editing process. Please do not aim for editing for 8 hours straight. That's just not going to work out well for you, right? You're going to burn out. Even professional editors don't typically edit for just 8 hours straight and just without taking breaks and, taking time to step away and refresh and really kind of, do something else, right? Because you just need that time to really kind of reset your mind, reset your focus. And honestly, it's really intense, deep work that you're doing when you do a self edit. It requires a lot of thinking, a lot of processing, a lot of analyzing and really thinking through that process. And so you want to make sure that you're not burning yourself out by trying to push through the whole thing. Don't try and edit your entire book in a day or a weekend. Give yourself time. Be realistic about the process. That's something that you can talk to to a professional editor about. If you're looking, kind of interviewing and thinking through who you want to work with, you can ask them for advice about that before you submit to your book to them. You could talk to a writer's group that you might be a part of and ask them about their editing process. It's different for everyone, but the important thing is to not try to burn through the editing process as fast as possible. One thing I want to leave with you is that writing is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And if you're trying to make it a sprint and you're trying to get through it as fast as possible, it's not going to be as enjoyable for you. It's not going to be as much of a blessing as I believe it could be. And so there is so much joy if you give yourself grace to enjoy the journey. You'll actually get through it faster if you take those breaks and if you take that time to reset and rest and really refresh yourself. And not just try to push through the whole thing as quickly as possible. So make sure to take those breaks. Really important. All right. Let's go through the rest of the comments here. Tori says, having a spirit of excellence and not striving for perfection. Yes, so important, so key. I think that's something a lot of us are in progress with working on. I know that's something, that I've worked on for quite a long time. And, it's a continual thing where we have to remind ourselves regularly not to strive for perfection, right? But to really allow God to empower us, to allow the Holy Spirit to work through us and to help us to create a work that really brings him joy and brings him glory ultimately. Absolutely. All right. And Tori says, the imperfections make us human and can be endearing. Thank God for Jesus. Yes, I love that so much, that it makes our work endearing. Absolutely. I saw this video not too long ago of I believe it was a pastor talking about the process of like a vase being broken and how there are certain types of art where you put that, that piece of broken artwork back together and make a mosaic out of it. And it is actually more beautiful in that form, not because it is perfectly put together and it has no flaws, but the perfections actually work together to lend a different level of beauty to the work that you would not be able to achieve any other way. And that is what the editing process is like for us as writers. It allows us to create a mosaic with our work, to create this beautiful piece of art that has imperfections running through it, but that ultimately brings glory and honor to God because of it and because of the things that are quirky and authentic about it. God uses all of those things for his glory, and we get to be a part of that process. So I hope that this live was helpful for you today. I hope that it blessed you and encouraged you. I hope it gave you some insight about the importance of self-editing in the writing process. If you have finished your rough draft or you're getting close to finishing, do not skip this step. Do not rush forward and try to find an editor to work with immediately. Take the time to go through the self-editing process first. It will help you to become a better writer. It will make your work better, and ultimately it will save you time and money on the back end when it comes to hiring that editor. So make sure you go through that process. And I believe that it will help you to create a book that you can really be proud of at the end of the day. So that is it for this week's Live with Lisa. If you found this video helpful and you want to learn more about how to write and live God's way, let's make this a regular thing. Go ahead and subscribe so you can follow and see all of the episodes, all of the videos when they come out every week. And make sure to leave a comment below letting me know what you're working on and what videos you would like to see about writing and living God's way. Once again, I will see you next week, same time, same place. I hope this video blessed you, and I will see you in the next Live with Lisa. Until next time, take care and God bless. Happy writing, y'all.